Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles.
Dear listeners, before we get started, drop a quick hi in the comments and let us know where you're tuning in from. Also, if you have any suggestions for us to make the channel better, please let us know. Now let's start with the story. I found out my parents had transferred the family business to my sister. So I walked away. No more 80-hour weeks, no more working for free. A week later, my dad called. Our biggest client is about to cancel. No apology, no acknowledgement, just panic. I answered coolly, let Sylvia handle it. She's the heir now, after all. The low, steady hum of the servers in the back office at Evergreen Solutions had been the constant soundtrack of my adult life. For 10 years, that sound was more than just background noise, it was the pulse of my existence. A mechanical lullaby for the relentless 80-hour workweeks I dedicated to the family business. I'm Martin, 32, and my identity had fused so tightly with Evergreen, the company my grandfather founded, that I no longer knew where I ended and the business began. My hands were calloused not from manual labor, but from years of gripping a mouse and typing into the early hours, muscles aching with a dull, familiar throb. The shadows under my eyes were permanent, a reminder of the late nights spent fixing bugs, polishing presentations, and sealing the deals that kept us running. I gave up everything. Vacations were an alien concept. My social life? Non-existent. Romantic relationships? They withered before they even bloomed, suffocated by the company's constant demands. I lived on cold pizza eaten at my desk, the grease-smudging paperwork and keyboards alike, all for what I thought was a noble cause. The future of my family, my parents' approval, the legacy I assumed I was helping to build. I dreamed of a day when my name would be etched into Evergreen's history beside "There's a rightful place earned through loyalty and sacrifice." But in hindsight, that was my greatest weakness, a deep, gnawing hunger for recognition. I believed trusted that they saw me, that they valued my effort, that they would one day reward it. Then there was Sylvia, my younger sister, the embodiment of everything I wasn't. While I arrived before dawn, she strolled in sometime afternoon, if at all. Designer handbags slung effortlessly over one shoulder. She worked part-time, often vanishing for months on end. When she returned, it was always with a fresh tan and some lavish story of her latest exotic escape. She missed critical meetings, her excuses ranging from the vaguely plausible to the outright absurd: a sudden migraine, a spa emergency, or needing time for creative clarity. But she was always praised. For her style, her charm, her surface-level charisma. "Oh, Sylvia just has such a knack for people," my mother would gush. Meanwhile, I was left cleaning up the mess from another missed deadline, while Sylvia's latest Instagram post, a sun-drenched photo of her lounging on a white beach in Bali, captioned "Living my best life, #blessed," was another bitter pill I learned to swallow. Even back then, I had a gnawing sense that Sylvia's best life was being bankrolled by what I now recognize were inflated marketing expenses from Evergreen charges that always seemed to show up on the books shortly after one of her extravagant sabbaticals. One Thanksgiving stands out with painful clarity, as vivid as if it happened yesterday. The warm, comforting sense of roasted turkey and pumpkin pie were nothing but a cruel memory. I was hunched over my laptop in a cold, empty office, the glow of the screen the only light in the room. I was desperately trying to close a deal with Global Corp, a make-or-break client that could have redefined Evergreen's future. My parents had called that day. Their voices were syrupy with concern. "Oh, Martin, you're just so dependable," they cooed. "Sylvia's having such a lovely time on her trip. We can't bother her." Dependable, yes, but never acknowledged for what that dependability truly cost me. I was the workhorse, Sylvia, the pampered show pony. And like a fool, I accepted my role, convinced that someday it would lead to what I believed was my rightful place in the company. The truth revealed itself on what began as an ordinary Tuesday. The day was its usual blur: back-to-back tasks, aching shoulders, eyes burning from too much screen time, and that familiar metallic tang of too much coffee on my tongue. I was digging through files looking for an old client contract, a project I'd managed solo years ago, when I stumbled onto a barely used company drive. A small jolt of curiosity, barely noticeable, guided my finger to click on a folder labeled private. Inside, an email marked confidential. Succession plan stared back at me. White text against a dark screen. My breath caught. The words blurred, then sharpened into a sharp, gutting clarity. Full ownership to transfer to Sylvia upon retirement. My chest tightened. The air in my lungs turned cold, and a heavy knot of dread twisted in my stomach. It felt like something vital had been scooped out of me and replaced with ice. I was hollow, empty. My fingers trembled so violently, I nearly dropped my phone. The screen lit up my pale, stunned reflection. I clicked through the attached documents, each page a new wound. each paragraph confirming what I had feared but never dared believe. Every sacrifice, every late night, every dollar I'd put back into the company, all of it flashed before my eyes in a nauseating montage. Had it all been for nothing? Was I nothing more than a tool used, then discarded? I printed the documents. The whir of the printer felt like a mockery of the scream I couldn't voice. The paper felt thin, insubstantial, yet impossibly heavy, the weight of a world that had just collapsed. My hands shook so badly the pages rustled like brittle leaves in a winter storm. I folded them with care, as though handling a fragile map to some long-lost treasure, and locked them away in my desk. I wasn't ready to face them again. Not yet. The truth was too raw, too immediate. That night, lying in bed, the quiet in my apartment was overwhelming, broken only by the loud ringing in my ears. The ceiling felt like it was pressing down on me, heavy and oppressive, like it might cave in at any moment. I kept replaying one of my father's most frequent, offhand remarks in my head. "You're so talented, Martin. You'll always land on your feet." He always said it with a dismissive wave whenever I dared to talk about my workload or future. But now, it rang hollow, cruel even. Not reassurance, but a calculated brush-off. A way of telling me I was expendable, that my worth was tied only to the profits I could generate, not to my inherent value, as their son was a truth I could no longer ignore. Was I merely a replaceable cog in their carefully orchestrated facade? This was my first real bottom, the searing realization that the family dream I had devoted myself to was, for them, nothing more than a transaction, a means to an end. The taste of betrayal was sharp and unrelenting, a constant tang that clung to my tongue. It gnawed at me, a dull, sickening throb that pulsed behind my eyes and spread into my chest, settling in my bones like a cold, unshakable ache. I drifted through the days at Evergreen, numb. My movements were mechanical, my smile a brittle imitation of the person I used to be. The familiar smells of stale coffee and printer toner, once oddly comforting, now felt like the scent of decay, the stench of a tomb. I knew I had to confront them. I had to rip away the mask and expose whatever truth lay beneath. The suspense, the silence was a slow, torturous suffocation. I chose what should have been a normal Sunday dinner. My mother's pot roast filled the house with its signature aroma, usually a comforting sign of home. But that night, the smell was cloying, too sweet, too heavy, and it turned my stomach. The dining room was decorated with framed photos. My graduation, Sylvia's first ballet recital, that cheesy family beach trip where we all wore matching Hawaiian shirts. Those once cherished images now felt foreign. The smiles in those frames stared back like accusations, ghosts of a carefully fabricated reality. I waited until dessert plates were cleared, the last smears of apple pie, a final flourish of deceit before I moved. My heart pounded like a trapped bird in my chest. With a deep, trembling breath, I reached into my worn leather messenger bag and pulled out the printed succession documents. I laid them on the polished oak table. They rustled faintly, but the sound cracked through the quiet like a gunshot. My parents' expressions twisted with shock, brief, involuntary, before something colder replaced it. A flicker of calculation. A mask slid back into place. Defense rose like a wall. "What is this, Martin?" my mother asked, her voice overly calm, almost syrupy. But her eyes betrayed her, flitting between my face and the papers like trapped animals. "It's the succession plan," I said. My voice was surprisingly steady. A strange calm washed over me. "The one that gives Sylvia full ownership of Evergreen. That cuts me out completely." The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. My father cleared his throat, a rough, stalling sound. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Instead, he brushed an invisible crumb from the tablecloth. "Don't be dramatic, Martin," he said finally, with a tired sigh. "It's just business. Sylvia, well, Sylvia needs financial stability more than you do. She's not," as he paused, searching for the word, "resourceful." At last, he looked at me. His eyes held that same rehearsed mix of concern and condescension I'd known all my life. It made my skin crawl. "You've always had the talent to succeed anywhere," he said. "We knew you'd be fine on your own." And there it was, their signature phrase. The familiar, well-worn line delivered with the usual dismissive wave of the hand. A verbal pat on the head. A subtle gaslight, cloaked as praise. A message that my feelings were overblown, that my pain was selfish, my devotion irrelevant. It was a subtle twist of the knife, expertly designed to make me question my own sanity, my own worth. Sylvia, ever the picture of indifference, merely shrugged and toyed with a loose thread on her expensive silk blouse. "Oh, that old thing. What's the big deal, Marty? You're so ambitious you'll just start something even bigger." The casual drop of my childhood nickname Marty, once a term of endearment, now stung like an insult. It felt deliberate, cutting, a cruel mockery of our shared past. In her eyes, I caught a glimmer of triumph, a flicker of satisfaction that she didn't bother to hide. "Is this what family means to you?" I whispered, my voice breaking on the last word, not so much a question as a desperate cry into a void that had nothing left to offer me. The silence that followed was oppressive. It echoed off the walls of what once felt like a loving home, now unfamiliar, cold. I felt hollow, gutted. The betrayal had weighed a physical pressure crushing my chest, threatening to steal the air from my lungs. It wasn't just about the business. It was about the decade I had sacrificed, the belief I'd clung to so tightly, now shattered beyond repair. The air turned thick, suffocating, charged with truths no one would say aloud and resentments left to rot in the quiet. That night, lying awake in my apartment, the silence felt overwhelming, made worse by the ringing in my ears and the noise in my mind. Outside, the city carried on, the distant siren, the quiet traffic, but everything seemed quiet, like the whole world was holding its breath with me. The anger inside me was a burning coal, hot and constant. But beneath it, something colder had taken root. A quiet, focused resolve. I couldn't let myself be used any longer. Leaving wasn't some impulsive outburst, it was a calculated act of self-preservation. A necessary move to expose who they really were and reclaim my own power. The weight of those thankless 80-hour weeks finally broke the last remnants of my hope for their approval. What remained was a hardened will. I began preparing in silence. Each night, after hours, I meticulously backed up my personal project files. Every email, every client message, every record showing my solo work on accounts like Global Corp, I archived it all. My intellectual property, my contributions. Not theft, just the truth. Undeniable evidence of my labor, my value, my presence. I knew I'd need it. The fight wasn't over. The act felt almost surgical cold, precise, detached, even though my heart ached with every click. It felt like betrayal. But they had betrayed me first, and far more profoundly. I also reached out to Ronald Maxwell, my former mentor at Evergreen. A steady, quiet presence over the years. Ronald, an old family friend, never said anything bad about my parents out loud, but I could always tell he didn't really approve. Now he didn't hold back. "You're doing the right thing, Martin," he said, his voice low and steady, a balm on my raw nerves. "Sometimes the hardest boundaries to draw are the ones with family, but they're the most necessary. You deserve better than what they've given you." He was the objective voice I desperately needed, a lifeline in the storm. The following Monday morning, exactly 1 week after the dinner, I sent my resignation email. It was short, blunt, unflinchingly formal. Effective immediately, I am resigning from my position at Evergreen Solutions due to a fundamental breach of trust and a necessary restructuring of personal priorities. I told no one. I let the news ripple through the company like a quiet detonation, a silent bomb at the core of their carefully constructed illusion. The aftermath was immediate and chaotic. My phone buzzed relentlessly with calls and messages. My parents cycled through the familiar stages, first demanding, then pleading, and finally, threatening. "You're abandoning your family, Martin. After everything we've done for you, this is a betrayal." Their words echoed with their usual weapon of choice. Guilt, a reminder of some imagined, endless debt they believed I owed. But my voice was calm, steady, and stripped of all emotion. "I'm protecting myself, Mom. You made your choices. Now I'm making mine." The words were heavy, but also freeing. A declaration. A quiet, unshakable line drawn in the sand. The ache that had once hollowed my chest was now replaced by a solid, steely resolve. Back at Evergreen Solutions, the fallout was immediate. The machine I had spent years streamlining began to unravel. Colleagues reached out in panic, projects stalled, clients grew restless, and deadlines passed unanswered. Sylvia, completely out of her depth, scrambled to delegate tasks she barely understood. Her voice, once measured and aloof, now cracked under pressure, sharp and frantic, exposing her incompetence for everyone to witness. The company, once efficient and modern thanks to countless hours of my unpaid labor, had become a chaos-ridden mess. Calls from anxious employees became the constant background noise to my new peace, distant, annoying, and irrelevant. Meanwhile, rumors of my abrupt departure spread like wildfire through the industry, igniting curiosity and concern. Clients were spooked, rivals intrigued. Friends still inside Evergreen didn't know where to place their loyalty, torn between the family name and the man who had quietly kept everything running. Then the call came. It was my father. His voice was raw, strained with fear, cracking under pressure I had never heard from him before. "Martin, our biggest client, Global Corporation, they're threatening to cancel. They say no one else understands the account. You have to come back. We're losing everything. You're ruining us." His desperation was thick, nearly choking. But there was no apology, no ownership, No mention of betrayal, no recognition of what had been taken from me. Only panic for his finances, for the company, not for me. The absence of remorse was a bitter confirmation. They hadn't changed. They never would. My response was cold, detached. Let Sylvia take care of it, Dad. She's the one who's supposed to inherit everything anyway. The silence after that was heavy. It felt like a final decision had just been made, and nothing else needed to be said. The taste in my mouth was ash and something else, victory. Bitter, yes, but real. The kind that comes at a cost. A bond broken beyond repair. The power dynamic had shifted completely. For the first time in my life, I held the leverage. Days later, something unexpected happened, a quiet turn of fate that felt almost divine in its timing. I had returned to my childhood home to collect a few forgotten belongings. Just sentimental things, a dusty old baseball glove, a weathered copy of my favorite childhood book, some faded photos. While digging through my father's old desk, one that had belonged to my grandfather before him, I discovered it. A worn, leather-bound journal. It was my grandfather's. A man remembered for his calm wisdom, unwavering integrity, and meticulous record-keeping. He had been the original founder of Evergreen Solutions, a man who valued fairness above all else. The brittle pages of his old leather-bound journal still carried the scent of aged paper and faint pipe tobacco, a comforting aroma that stirred a wave of bittersweet nostalgia. Between entries recounting family holidays and fishing trips, I found something unexpected: detailed notes chronicling the early days of the company. He wrote of his vision for its future and his steadfast dedication to ethical business practices. And then, nestled between two fragile pages, almost hidden from view, I found it. An original pre-incorporation partnership agreement. It predated the current ownership structure, a relic from another era. Next to a particular, almost antiquated clause, he had written a note in his familiar looping script. To ensure fair play for all who truly build this dream. No one should be left behind. The clause itself stated that if company ownership were ever transferred without documented consent and fair compensation for any primary contributing partner, a term he had clearly defined, the agreement could be legally contested. And he had listed me by name. It acknowledged my early, unpaid contributions to the fledgling family business, summers spent filing, organizing, helping before I was even a teenager. The clause allowed for legal intervention, potentially forcing a sale or placing the company into a neutral trust. It was my grandfather's foresight, a quiet safeguard against the very manipulation I was now facing. A final act of protection, a silent guardian from beyond the grave. This discovery wasn't about money. It was about recognition. His enduring belief in fairness. A posthumous acknowledgement of my value, something my parents had refused to offer. It felt like a warm hand on my shoulder. A whisper of encouragement from the one man who had always truly seen me. Armed with this undeniable evidence, I reached out to a lawyer recommended by Ronald, someone sharp, empathetic, and deeply experienced in corporate and family law. His name was Mr. Hendricks. He had kind eyes and a razor-sharp intellect. He listened carefully and without judgment. When I later told Ronald about the meeting, he simply nodded, his eyes reflecting the quiet recognition of a betrayal, not just of a business, but of a soul. Mr. Hendricks's assessment was immediate and clear. The clause was legally valid, and my case was strong. Especially with my detailed records of unpaid labor and the current crisis at Evergreen, which highlighted Sylvia's inability to lead. This isn't just a claim, Martin, he told me. This is justice. With his guidance, I filed a formal legal challenge to the succession plan and submitted a significant claim for unpaid wages, going all the way back to my earliest contributions. The documents were served swiftly, triggering another wave of chaos within my parents' camp. A fresh tremor through their carefully curated reality. Their response was predictable and ugly. They launched a public smear campaign, blasting social media with outrage, portraying me as a greedy, ungrateful son intent on destroying the family legacy. They posted childhood photos of me alongside bitter captions about betrayal and dishonor. Counter lawsuits were threatened. Baseless accusations of corporate espionage were hurled. They even issued veiled personal threats, desperate, clumsy attempts to intimidate. They tried to rally extended family and mutual friends to their side, leaning on years of social manipulation. But their carefully maintained masks were cracking. Beneath the polished veneer, their desperation and true nature began to show. In the community, the whispers grew louder. A quiet reckoning. The narrative was shifting. During discovery, Mr. Hendricks, ever calm and methodical, unearthed even more damning evidence. Sylvia's part-time salary, it turned out, was astronomically inflated, far exceeding any reasonable market standard for the minimal effort she contributed. Buried deep within the company's accounting software were detailed expense reports that painted a damning picture. luxury handbags from Fifth Avenue, top-tier electronics, and extravagant vacations to places like the Maldives and the Swiss Alps. All of it meticulously masked as client entertainment or marketing expenses. This was Sylvia's pattern, a lifestyle of surface-level glamour entirely financed by the company I had poured my life into. But even more devastating than the financial abuse was a string of internal emails exchanged between Sylvia and our parents, some dating back years. They revealed a calculated and sustained campaign of manipulation. Sylvia had played on their fears, subtly sowing distrust, feeding them lies to erode their confidence in me. She exaggerated my independence, painted my ambition as a threat, and insinuated I would eventually abandon the company, so better to secure her future first. "He's a threat, Mom, Dad," one email read. "He'll take over everything. I'm the one who truly understands the brand, the image." Mr. Hendricks, grim and measured, put it plainly. She played them like a fiddle. She had even gone so far as to suggest that excluding me from ownership would drive me to work harder, a twisted form of psychological manipulation designed to control through rejection. Everything came to a head during a final, high-stakes mediation session, the last step before a full-court trial. At Mr. Hendricks's insistence, a carefully selected group of neutral family members were present, along with several of Evergreen's oldest, most respected clients. Even a representative from Global Corporation, still evaluating their potential withdrawal, was in attendance. The atmosphere was charged, tense with anticipation, the air heavy with the scent of aged documents and quiet dread. Under the harsh flicker of fluorescent lights, the truth was laid bare. Mr. Hendricks, in his signature calm, deliberate style, presented the evidence. One by one, the incriminating emails appeared on the screen, each pixel a blow to Sylvia's carefully maintained illusion. Then came the financial records. Line by line, transaction by transaction, he detailed the blatant misuse of company funds. Gasps rippled through the room. Sylvia, usually composed and immaculately put together, unraveled. Her expression twisted into one of panic and rage. She exploded into a tearful, high-pitched tirade. Her voice cracked as it bounced off the conference room walls. "He always made me look bad. He never appreciated me. I deserve this." Her breakdown, emotional, unfiltered, and public, was her own undoing. It was a confession disguised as a plea, delivered in front of clients, family, and witnesses. The Global Corporation representative, witnessing the scene in silence, simply shook their head, a quiet but unmistakable signal. Their mind was made up. The social mask my family had worn for years, polished, respectable, pristine, finally disintegrated. Beneath it was only rot. The court's ruling came quickly and decisively. Backed by the strength of my grandfather's foresight, the damning evidence of fraud, and Mr. Hendricks's unassailable presentation, the judge ruled in my favor. My years of unpaid, unacknowledged labor were officially recognized. The judgment affirmed not just my legal rights, but my intrinsic worth, a declaration I had long been denied. It wasn't just a legal victory. It was just as cold, precise, and absolute. The fallout for Evergreen Solutions was immediate and catastrophic. The succession plan was overturned. The company, now proven to be mismanaged and racked with infighting, was deemed unstable. It was forced into an emergency sale, absorbed by a much larger rival, Horizon Dynamics. My parents, who had clung so tightly to the illusion of control, lost nearly everything they had so carefully built, most of it on the foundation of my labor. Their cherished legacy, the cornerstone of their identity, was dismantled piece by painful piece. The fallout was swift and brutal. Financially, they were devastated. Assets were frozen, their meticulously planned retirement unraveled like morning mist. Their public image, once polished and admired, was in ruins. The social mask they had worn for decades, the one that had deceived friends, colleagues, and the broader community, was shredded. In its place remained only public disgrace. Once celebrated for their successful family and seemingly perfect life, they were now seen for what they truly were: manipulative, dishonest, and self-serving. The phone stopped ringing. Invitations disappeared. They became pariahs in the very social circles they had fought so hard to impress. Sylvia, too, faced the full consequences of her actions. While she narrowly avoided criminal charges for embezzlement, thanks only to Mr. Hendricks's expert negotiation, the civil penalties were staggering. Bankruptcy loomed over what had once been her glittering life. Her carefully curated social media presence, once her proudest creation and greatest shield, collapsed entirely. The facade was gone, exposed as pure fiction. The lavish lifestyle she had flaunted so publicly was revealed for the illusion it was, and everyone saw through it. The likes and comments vanished, replaced by silence and judgment. As for Global Corporation, Their decision was swift and merciless. An email brief, Clinical announced the termination of their contract with Evergreen Solutions, citing irreconcilable differences and lack of trust. It was the final blow. A cold, irrefutable confirmation of how deeply my parents had failed. They had prioritized favoritism and appearances over truth, substance, and integrity. The company, once the shining symbol of their success, now stood as a cautionary monument to their downfall. In the aftermath, a deep and unfamiliar stillness settled over my life. The constant hum of urgency that had once driven me the endless calls, the flood of emails finally ceased. In its place was calm. The ache that had gripped my shoulders for years began to ease. The dark circles under my eyes lightened. The bitter metallic taste of stress gave way to the pure, refreshing taste of still water. I used my settlement significant at last, and a true reflection of my decade of labor, to build something of my own. I founded Anchor Point Strategies, a boutique consulting firm grounded in transparency, fair compensation, and a sincere appreciation for talent. Everything my family's business had failed to be. The office was modest, but to me it felt expansive, filled with light, and guided entirely by my own vision. Ronald, my former mentor, became my first official advisor. His quiet guidance and steady belief in me offered a kind of reassurance I hadn't realized I needed. He saw the fire in me, the unshakable passion for doing business the right way. Former colleagues began reaching out, people who had watched from the sidelines, who now saw the truth clearly and felt vindicated. They believed in what I was building. And our clients? They didn't come because of manipulation or polished illusions. They came because they saw results. Because they trusted us. My name, once subtly stained by years of quiet defamation, now stood for integrity and competence. And with that came a peace I never thought I'd know. The pressure, the emotional games, the desperate hunger for approval that never came, they were gone. The house I grew up in, its walls echoing with judgment and silent demands, became a distant memory. I was finally free. The house I once called home had become a ghost of a past I no longer inhabited. In contrast, my new apartment, small but truly mine, felt like a sanctuary. It was my anchor in a sea I had charted myself, a place where I could finally breathe freely. I began to build a new kind of family, not one of blood, but of choice. Friends who uplifted me, who celebrated my victories and supported me through the emotional waves that still rose unexpectedly. These were the people who truly saw me, not the role I had once been forced to play. In time, I entered a new romantic relationship, healthy, grounded in mutual respect and genuine connection. It was unlike anything I had known growing up, a sharp contrast to the transactional and conditional love that had defined my family life. It was eye-opening, even healing, to experience what true, unconditional support could feel like. Still, the scars of the past remained. Late at night, memories would sometimes stir: my parents' betrayal, the sting of their words, the heavy weight of their deceit. It would catch me off guard, a sharp pang, like a phantom limb aching. But that pain no longer consumed me. Now, it was simply a scar, a mark of survival, and a testament to my resilience. It no longer defined me. The barbed wire that had once coiled around my chest had finally loosened. I could breathe again, deeply, freely, fully. Months later, I ran into my parents and Sylvia at a community charity gala, an event they had once ruled with effortless charm. But now they looked worn, diminished. The polish of their public personas had dulled. Their smiles were brittle, their eyes hollow with bitterness and regret. My mother approached, her face twisted into the same familiar expression, part pleading, part accusation. Her voice was thin, almost trembling. "Martin, look at what you've done to us. We're ruined. How could you?" But my response was calm, free of anger or spite. "I wish you well, Mom," I said simply, my gaze steady. "But my path is my own now." Silence followed, thick and final. It was the sound of boundaries being honored, of a line clearly drawn. Not through rage, but through resolve. They could not cross it. That silence echoed louder than any fight we ever had, more powerful than any apology they'd never offer. They turned away, defeated. Words lost in the face of a quiet truth they could no longer deny. I didn't feel triumph, only peace. What I've come to understand is that my story isn't just about financial betrayal or legal vindication. It's about something deeper, the painful, liberating journey toward reclaiming myself. It's about realizing that family isn't always defined by blood, but by trust, respect, and love without conditions. It's about the necessity and the courage of setting boundaries, of valuing your own worth, and recognizing that true healing begins the moment you choose yourself, even if it means walking away from those who were supposed to love you the most. It's about building a life that is authentically, unapologetically your own. Have you ever had to choose between loyalty to family and your own well-being? What does family mean when blood isn't enough? Share your thoughts below. Let's redefine what family truly means. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.